think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Barbara McDowell Foundation Grant Application Information Session. Just a reminder to keep your microphones muted throughout the session and to introduce yourself in the chat feature. The purpose of today's webinar is to prepare potential grant applicants for submitting applications to the Barbara McDowell Foundation. One of the reasons that we decided to host this webinar is because over the past 6 months, the foundation has updated several pieces of the grant application. The eligibility criteria, the scoring criteria, and the online application have all been redesigned to make it more clear for applicants and for the committees and board members who rate the applications. And as we made so many changes, we thought it would be helpful to give people an opportunity to hear from the foundation on the application process. So that's the purpose of our webinar. And again, thanks everyone for joining us from all across the country, and we hope that we can answer any questions that you've got about the application process. Your host today, I'm Aaron Steiner. I'm the Special Administrator for the Barbara McDowell Foundation. We also have with us today Jerry Hartman, who is the founder and the Foundation President and Board Chair. Katie McDonald is our Operations Director. We also have Melissa Sullivan, our Development Director, and Peggy Zwissler, one of our board members. So we've got several representatives of the foundation here today, and we're happy and thankful that you've joined us. And if you haven't already, I've mentioned this a couple times, but we'd also like to hear who's on the call by introducing yourselves in the chat feature and telling us your name and your organization name and where you're from. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the history of the foundation and its grant-making efforts. We're going to review the just the overview of the grant application process. And I just want to mention that everything on the agenda, as we walk through each of these pieces, the grant criteria and the scoring criteria, the reporting and grant terms, and the online grant application, are all available on the foundation's website under the Apply for a Grant header on the navigation bar. So if you click on that header, and we'll actually, when we go to look at the online grant application form, we'll go to the website. But if you click on that header, you'll see each of these as pages within the grant application, the overview, the criteria, the scoring criteria, etc. For the question and answer section, so for the question and answer, what we'd ask is that you submit your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and then Katie will compile those questions and we'll answer them at the end. And also to say that any questions that you may have will in no way favor or disfavor the review of your grant application by the foundation. So please be candid in your questions, and we really want to make sure that you leave today well prepared to complete an application. We believe that the better quality of the applications, the better impact we can have, and so we really want to make sure to give you a full and complete picture. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Hartman, the President and Board Chair of the Foundation, to cover the history of the Foundation. Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. Very, very briefly, you see up on the slide a little history about the foundation. It was founded in 2009 after the death of my wife, Barbara McDowell, from brain cancer. And she was a well-known and forceful advocate for social justice. And I decided to create the foundation to continue her mission to achieve social justice. And as you see up on the slide, we have 15 issue areas that we have given grants for over the past, and we will continue to give grants in those 15 issues areas. Over the past 12 years or so, we have supported 65 cases with nearly $1,400,000 in grants, and we've made that to those grants to 49 organizations. Some organizations have gotten a grant in more than 1 year. We've also coordinated 20 high impact cases and investigations where we have a corollary program we call our high impact litigation project. And all of this this history is set forth on the foundation's website. I'll turn it back now over to Aaron.
Thanks, Jerry. I just want to mention as well that the results of those grant funded cases can be found on the foundation's website, and we're really proud of the work of the grantees and thankful for the grantee organizations for the impact they've made using those dollars to advance and achieve social justice, and would encourage you to review the results of the grant funded cases on the foundation's website. So I'm going to start with the grant application overview. The application period runs from June 1st to August 1st, and you must apply using the online form. We'll actually later in the webinar go to the foundation's website and look at the online form. The online form is available for your review at any time, and I would encourage you and whoever in your organization is going to be working on completing the grant application to ahead of time review the application before that June 1st period. However, please do not submit an application until June 1st, and we'll accept applications from June 1st to August 1st. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. I want to look at the calendar what day August 1st falls on, if it's a weekend or a weekday. But last year it fell on a weekend, and we would still accept applications through that weekend day, even if August 1st is on a weekend.
Aaron, it's on a Monday.
It's on a Monday. Well, that's great. It gives everyone that last minute Monday to get the applications in. Thank you, Katie. So grants are awarded for the period of October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023. We would call those the 2023 grants or the 2023 grantees, and this follows along with the foundation's fiscal year. The foundation anticipates awarding $250,000 split among 5 grantees, and this is in line with the award amount over the last several years. Jerry's mentioned, the overall amount that the foundation has given away in its history, and it is the discretion of the board at the annual meeting to determine the final amount given in total and the final number of grantees. So this $250,000 among 5 grantees is a general guideline, but it's not set in stone. So the applications all come in August 1st, and the committees of the board and the full board review those grant applications in September. And we'll talk about that process in a little bit. And the selected grantees are notified the last week in September, and applicants not selected are notified in the first week of October. Again, all of this information can be found on the foundation's website. If you do have questions as we're moving along, please recall that the question and answers session will be held at the end of this webinar. And if you want to submit a question for that session, please put it in the chat feature, and Katie will be compiling those throughout our webinar today. So this is the basic eligibility for the grant criteria. The applicant organization must be a 501c3. the application must be for a specific social justice legal case. And the application, you can apply for the filing of an appeal. As I mentioned, there are several aspects to the grant application that are new this year, and the ability to apply for an appeal is one of those new aspects. And you'll see that when we walk through the grant application, if you indicate that you're filing for an appeal, you will have a couple of questions that are unique to the filing of an appeal, and the budget form that you have to fill out for your case, it will be unique if you're filing for an appeal. The case or the appeal must have been filed already or will be filed by November 1st, 2022. And the grant funds are to be used for attorney time charges and litigation expenses. And the option to apply grant funds to litigation expenses is also a new feature of the grant application this year. And again, when we get to the online application, I'll show you where and how you can indicate that you would like to apply grant funds to litigation expenses. The funds must be spent in that grant time period, October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023. We do have a process that if there are leftover funds, you can contact the foundation and we can have a discussion about how those leftover funds can be spent if it's not spent by September 30th. But typically, I would say over 95% of the grantees would spend the funds in that time period of October 1st to September 30th. The grantee must sign and agree to the grant agreement, which will provide a little bit of an overview in the webinar a little bit later. And previous grantees can be considered for subsequent grants, as Jerry mentioned earlier. So we have had organizations that have received multiple grants throughout the years. Continuing with the basic eligibility. So the foundation will not fund individual cases unless it raises systemic or precedential issues. So we're really looking at large, high impact class action type suits, not individual cases, unless they do raise a systemic or precedential issue, in which case you would outline that in the grant application. And the same goes for criminal cases. So the foundation would only fund those if those cases raise constitutional, systemic, or precedential issues. The foundation will not fund the filing of an amicus brief. We will not fund general or programmatic support. So over the years, we have had organizations come to the foundation asking if we will fund like their legal clinic, for example, which is a program. And even though we recognize that that's you know, an impact-worthy effort and is helping to achieve social justice, it's not in line with what we're looking to fund, which are specific social justice litigation cases. And the foundation will not fund advocacy or lobbying efforts. And in the grant agreement, it's specifically outlined that the funds from the grant cannot be used for these efforts. Again, all of this information is on the foundation's website, but if you do have a question, then please indicate that question in the chat, and we will work to address it at the end of today's webinar in the questions and answers session. So one of the things that we wanted to do when we configured the grant application process for this year was to be very clear about to applicants what would make an ideal case for funding from the Barbara McDowell Foundation, what would make an ideal applicant organization, and if the organization has partners, what makes an ideal partner organization for a case. So so we thought, well, we'll just say, what is an ideal case? And it's clearly one that addresses a social justice issue consistent with the foundation's issue areas. It's one that significantly improves the well-being, social conditions, and/or civil liberties of disadvantaged persons and/or groups in the United States. So that really, I think, is the heart of the ideal case that the foundation is looking to fund. Significantly improves. And so when you're filling out your grant application, you really want to outline how is this significantly improving the well-being and civil liberties of persons and groups in the United States. And it is one that has strong legal arguments for its successful litigation. And that's a pretty direct question when we look in the application, is what is your argument for the successful litigation of this case? What is an ideal applicant organization? It's an organization that has a strong history of successfully litigating the type of case proposed, and/or a strong history of litigating high impact cases. So what's the and/or about? So you might have an organization that has a strong history of litigating cases in children's rights, for example, but maybe not yet a strong history of litigating high impact cases. So when you're filling out your application, you could, for example, lean on that history of litigating children's rights cases, assuming you're applying for a children's rights case. Or if maybe you're an organization that has successfully litigated high impact cases, but not in refugee and immigration rights, but you're applying for a case in refugee and immigration rights. So you're going to want to lean on that strong history of successfully litigating high impact cases. So it's an and/or when it comes to that history for the ideal applicant organization. And then it's the same with the attorneys. So you're going to want to outline, how do the attorneys who are litigating the case proposed, how have they successfully litigated other children's rights cases, or how have they litigated high impact cases, or maybe they've got both. And the another piece that makes an ideal applicant organization is that the applicant organization, even with the support of law firms or other social justice organizations, demonstrates a strong need for financial support for the case for which they're applying. So there's a lot built up in this question, so I'm going to take a moment to unpack it. So in the next series of slides, we're going to talk about the support of law firms or other social justice organizations. But whether or not your organization has the support of law firms or social justice organizations, in the application, your organization will need to demonstrate that you have a strong financial need or strong need for financial support. And you're going to do that both through the budget for the case. So something that's new with this year's application is that we are asking applicants to complete a budget for the case for the fiscal year for which you're applying. So you're going to have to indicate the revenue that's allocated towards just the case for which you're applying, as well as outline the expenses for the case for which you're applying. And so that budget, along with a narrative question that asks about your need for financial support, through the combination of that budget and that narrative question, you'll need to demonstrate your strong need for financial support for the case for which you're applying. This could be one of those areas where folks have questions as we're going through the webinar. So I just want to remind you that if you do have questions, you submit those in the chat feature, and Katie will compile those, and we will get to the answers to those questions towards the end of the webinar. So I just mentioned this, you're going to submit a detailed case budget, and you're also going to submit an operating budget for your organization. So partner organizations. So case partners could include other social justice organizations and or law firms, but it is not required for the applicant to have partner organizations. So generally, the foundation is agnostic about whether or not you have partner organizations. If you have another social justice organization or a law firm that is helping you to litigate the social justice case for which you're applying, then that's great. And if you don't, that's great too. But if you do have partner organizations, then we are going to evaluate the application in the same way as if we are evaluating your organization, so that the partners also have a strong history of successfully litigating the issues in the case, and that the attorneys from the partners also have a strong history of successfully litigating the case. And you'll see when we get to the grant application how we're very specific about asking these questions and giving you an opportunity to complete the information for the partner organizations. And what you'll also see that when we come to the application rating criteria, so the criteria on which the applications are evaluated, you'll see that essentially if you don't have a partner organization, we're going to evaluate your organization's history of successfully litigating the cases. If you do have a partner organization, we're going to be evaluating the partner organizations and your organization essentially as if it was one group that was applying for the application or applying for the grant for the case. So again, this might be another area where because it's new and because it has some nuances, you might have questions, so please submit those questions in the chat. So the scoring process and the criteria. So every application received is reviewed first by the advisory committee. So every application and last year we received about 75 applications. The year before that, we received over 100 applications. Every one of those applications does get reviewed and scored. And from the advisory committee, those semifinalists move on to the grant committee, who selects the finalists, and then the full board reviews the finalists and selects the final grantees at our September annual meeting. So I think it's important to know that every application is scored at every step of the process using the same 5 criteria, so that there is consistency among the application review process. And so whether you're an initial application, a semifinalist, or a finalist, that we've really worked to put that consistent framework and these clear criteria into place. So what are the scoring criteria? So first off, each criteria is scored on a scale of 1 to 9, with 1 being the lowest score and 9 the highest. I'm going to give the overarching statement or criteria for each, but you should go to the website. Interested applicants should go to the website. The specific rating scales for each criteria are laid out very clearly on the website. So would recommend that you review those before you submit your online application. So criteria 1 is alignment with the mission. And you can see that we've been building, right? So each step of the process, we've talked about what is an ideal case a little bit earlier. Well, now we're going to rate the application to see if it matches with the alignment with the mission, and that it is an ideal case, that it will improve the well-being and social conditions and civil liberties of disadvantaged persons and groups in the United States. So we want to make sure that if we're asking you for information on the grant application, that we're looking at how it can be ranked in the criteria and that it fits with what is an ideal case and an ideal organization applying. The quality of the case. So we talked, when we looked at an ideal case earlier, we talked about how it has a strong legal rationale or legal theory for its successful litigation. We're going to rate that as one of the criteria in the application scoring process. Capacity. So we're looking at two different pieces when we're thinking about the organization that's applied for, well, actually three different pieces, but three different pieces for the organization that's applying for the grant. One, does it have the capacity? And how do we measure the capacity? Is that the applicant organization and potential partners, if applicable, can successfully litigate a case of this nature. So we talked earlier about what is an ideal applicant organization, what is an ideal partner organization. One of the things that makes an ideal applicant or partner organization is that they have a history, a strong history of successfully litigating cases, high impact cases of the nature of the case proposed. So we're going to rate that as a criteria in the application. And again, if it's just an applicant organization, no partners, then the applicant organization will be rated and scored on its ability to successfully litigate the proposed case. If it's an applicant organization and potential partners, they'll essentially be rated as one group, and that group's ability to successfully litigate a case of this nature. Capability. So how do we know if an applicant organization is capable of litigating the proposed case? That comes from the information that we ask about for the attorneys and their history, its successful history of litigating high impact cases or the types of cases proposed. And so we're going to ask questions about that on the application, and then we're going to rate it in the criteria. And financial need, we talked about this earlier when looking at the ideal applicant organization, and that even with the support of partners, the organization demonstrates financial need to pursue the proposed case. And you'll answer that question in both the form of the case budget as well as in a narrative question. I'll again mention that all of this information is on the foundation's website under the Apply for a Grant header on the navigation bar of the foundation's website. So, and in much more detail. And if you've got questions, go ahead and submit those in the chat. We'll talk about the reporting and grant terms for selected grantees. So if your organization is selected for a grant, we require that you sign a grant agreement and electronically return it to the foundation and provide to the foundation a case and organizational summary for the foundation's websites. I'll mention here that if you go to the Our Grants page of the foundation's website, you'll see all of the grants that the foundation has awarded in its history. So you can both get a sense of what it would look like to submit a case and organizational summary, and reviewing those grants would give you a good idea of what kinds of cases the foundation is interested in funding and the kinds of social justice issue areas that we support. We have reporting terms. We have, there's essentially going to, we're asking grantees to submit a report each quarter. So in the first and third quarter, that's a short 2-paragraph report on the progress of the case. So I guess would be the second and fourth quarter, we ask for a longer 2-page 6-month and year-end report on the progress of the case. And again, the 6-month and year-end reports, we actually publish those to the foundation's website. So if you'd like to see an example of what those look like, you can go to the foundation's website and see those under the Our Grants page. And we ask that throughout the grant period, you include any links to news stories about the case and photos related to the case during any quarter, which really then is an opportunity for the foundation to spread the good work of its grantees. It's an opportunity for us to thank the grantees and your efforts, and to clearly outline the impact that the foundation is making through its grants. So those news stories and photos can be helpful in those promotion efforts. You'll also have brief quarterly conversations with the foundation staff to discuss the contents and the updates of the reports and answer any questions. And then the grantees are required to submit timesheets tracking the attorney hours and time charges and the expenses detailed in the grant application. So you may recall earlier I mentioned that for the first time, the foundation is allowing the option of applicants to indicate if they would like a portion of the grant funds to be applied to specific litigation expenses. In the past, it's just been for attorney hours and time charges, but we're now allowing for litigation expenses to also be applied for. So if your organization applies and is approved for a grant and it does include litigation expenses, we'd ask that you report the expenses paid in the quarterly timesheets. There is a, and this is something new as well, is that we're asking grantees to report their attorney hours and time charges using a standardized matrix to ensure consistency in the reporting. And this is the standardized matrix, which is a combination of the United States Attorney and Laffey rates, which are often used by courts to determine an award of fees for a fee petition. So the matrix is only for the purpose of reporting the expenditure of grant funds and for the foundation to determine the time amount spent on a grant awarded and ensure uniformity in that reporting process. But the matrix values are not intended to replace hourly rates that a grantee organization uses for filing fee petitions. So this is solely for the foundation's grant reporting process. Again, this could be something that folks might have questions on, and you can submit those in the chat. There are additional grantee terms that we'd ask that you review before applying to make sure that you are in agreement with those terms. And you can both review them on the foundation's website, and they're actually part of the application, the online application. There's a checkbox to indicate that you've read and agreed to each of the terms of the grantee terms. So now we're going to take a brief walk through the grant application on the foundation's website. And what I hope that you'll see is that all of the pieces that we've talked about in terms of what makes an ideal case and how we are rating those applications, you'll see how that is embedded and built into the questions that we ask in the online form. And for folks who might have joined us late, just a reminder that the grant application form, while it is now live on the website, we ask that applicants do not submit applications until June 1st. So June 1st through August 1st is when you can submit applications. However, I would encourage you to review ahead of time the online form before you submit an application, and you must use the online form when submitting an application. I'm going to navigate to Can we all see Katie? Are we good? We can see the
Yep, you're
website.
good.
Okay, good. So as I mentioned, all of the information that we've reviewed so far today is on the under the Apply for Grant header on the navigation bar of the Foundation's website, the overview, the grant criteria, the scoring criteria, the reporting and grant terms, and the online grant application. So the online grant application, pretty straightforward organization information. Again, the applicant organization must be a 501c3 organization in order to apply. I will mention that the Facebook and Twitter URLs are not required. However, at the end of each application period, we actually go through and use the Foundation's social media profiles, our Facebook page and Twitter page, and like and follow all of the applicant organizations' Facebook and Twitter pages to just help us grow our network and, you know, keep communication lines open. So we would ask that if you've got a Facebook page or Twitter profile, you put that information into the application. Pretty straightforward contact information for the primary contact and additional contact person if applicable. Now we get into the case information. So we're asking you simply to state the name of the case for which you're seeking funding, and if it's already been filed, to include the case caption for the case. So I mentioned earlier that for the first time, the Foundation has opened the option for applicant organizations to apply for an appeal. And so if you indicate yes, that the proposed case is an appeal of a lower court decision, then later on, when it comes to filling out the case budget, you'll have a different case budget form than if you are not applying for an appeal, because there are different expenses that would be indicated for an appeal that wouldn't be indicated for a non-appeal case. So executive summary in 200 words or less, describe your proposed case and whether or not the proposed case has been filed, yes or no. If yes, what was the original filing date? And if yes, what is the current procedural status of the proposed case? If no, what is the anticipated filing date? And again, to reiterate that the filing must be by November 1st of 2022 in order to qualify for a grant from the Foundation. You select the issue areas that the proposed case addresses. We ask you to indicate if the proposed case's impact is limited to a specific state, multiple states, or nationwide. The Foundation will fund a case that is just limited to a specific state if the case is still addressing, you know, down here, if the case is still improving the well-being, social conditions, and or civil liberties of disadvantaged persons or groups. So it doesn't disqualify your organization if your case is limited to a specific state, but we would like that for information purposes. What is the legal precedent your proposed case seeks to establish? And the legal precedent question will be scored in the criteria of both criteria 1 and criteria 2 of the application scoring process. We would take the legal precedent question into consideration in both of those grant criteria, both those scoring criteria rather. So alignment with the Foundation's mission, pretty clear. How does the successful litigation of the case improve the well-being, social conditions, etc.? And you can see how that directly links up with what is an ideal case and how we will be rating that when we talked about that information earlier. The quality of the case, what is the legal theories for your successful litigation of the proposed case? So again, we're looking for a case that has a strong legal theory for its successful litigation. And we'd also like to know if there are other pending cases applying the same legal theories. If so, list those cases and the rationale for bringing your case. So when we're looking at a strong legal theory, we're also interested in not necessarily being duplicative in our funding efforts. So that's where this question comes into play in the quality of the case. Capacity and capability, we talked about those two rating criteria. What is your organization's history of successfully litigating the case? And then listing your attorneys from your organization and what is their experience litigating these types of cases. And we'll be directly looking at that in the rating criteria. Something that is new is on the form, we're asking you about the partner organizations. So to reiterate, the foundation is agnostic in whether or not your organization is applying with a partner. If they are applying with a partner, we want to know that the partner or partners also have a strong history of successfully litigating these kinds of cases, and also have attorneys who have a strong history of successfully litigating these kinds of cases. So if you click yes, if you leave it no, then you just proceed from here. But if you're using the support of a law firm, you click yes, and you get a whole series of questions about the law firm and the name, the address. What kind of support is the law firm? Are they helping with litigation? Are they helping with client outreach? Are they helping with financial support or funding for experts? And if so, you're going to indicate that in the budget below for the case. And then you're going to, again, address the success of the attorneys from the partner organization or from the partner law firm, as well as the law firm's history in successfully litigating these types of cases. There is space to actually include up to 4 law firms and up to 4 social justice organizations. So again, you can see this, there was a space for law firm 1, then law firm 2, and then if you have more than 2 law firms, you would indicate here, and you would get 2 more sections of questions. And then, are you intending to use support from another social justice organizations? And you'll get the same, if you click yes, you'll get the same series of questions for your partner social justice organizations that might be helping to litigate the case. So again, this is a new feature in the application. So if you have questions, please indicate those in the chat. So another new section is under the financial need is a proposed case budget. And this is a budget for the preparation and trial of the proposed case for the grant period, i.e. the fiscal year of the foundation from October 1st to September 30th. And we're asking, first of all, the revenue allocated by the applicant organization. So this is the revenue from your organization that's being allocated to the specific case for which you're applying. And that can be in the form of foundation grants, law firm grants, individual contributions, investment income, or additional funds allocated. But you'll see that you're going to indicate those funds, and then you'll get a total income from all those sources specific for the case for which you're applying. The next table is expenses for the case for which you're applying in the form of attorney time charges, court filing fees, expert witness fees, etc. So the first column is the expenses that will be incurred for the case in the grant year. The second column is any contributions from partners. So again, if you're applying for a case and your case partner, and we'll just say for sake of argument, that's $10,000 in attorney time charges, and your case partner is contributing in attorney time charges $5,000, then we want to know what the expenses are that you're going to be incurring for the case and what the contributions are from your partners. Then we want to know how much for each line item are you requesting from the foundation to be applied to the case expenses. So maybe you're going to say, we're going to therefore apply for $5,000 from the foundation to help us cover the total $10,000 in expenses from the attorney time charges. And you'll use this table to build your budget. Right now there's a net loss for the case because I didn't put in any revenue. And then therefore you're requesting $5,000 from the foundation. So as I mentioned, this table, the proposed case budget, along with the narrative question, as demonstrated in your case budget, why does your organization need financial support, will be used to evaluate your organization's financial need when it comes to reviewing the applications. We'll also ask you to submit an organization budget. The organization budget is more for information purposes, so we can understand the size and scope of the organization, and is pretty straightforward. It's not for the case, and it's for your current fiscal year, and pretty straightforward with revenue, expenses. We are asking you to break down your program services expenses, your management and general expenses by percentage, and your fundraising expenses by percentage. Up here, we say fundraising expenses not including personnel costs, but down here, we do want you to include the personnel costs when it comes to the percentage. And then what percentage of your organization's budget is allocated to attorney salaries and benefits? So this is the total dollar amount and the percentage relative to your organization's budget. And then we've got all of the reporting and grant terms that I talked about that you've got to check off, and then sign at the bottom electronically. So as I mentioned, I would highly recommend that your organization review that information. It is available online right now to review. And take some time and look at it. I'm not sure why it's doing that. 1 second, please, from current slide. There we go. So we will attempt in the next 9 answers to answer the 9 minutes to answer the questions submitted via chat. And if we'll see where we're at now in 8 minutes. So Katie, do you want to share the questions? Yeah.
Thank you everyone who has submitted questions. It looks like we have 7 questions, so hopefully we can get through these. We'll start with the first, which is, can the funds pay for any pre-litigation work, such as expert comments to build the administrative record?
Jared, you want to tackle that one? You're on mute though.
Go ahead and turn it off.
Okay.
Pre-litigation expenses, if they occur prior to the fiscal year, could not be included. If they are during the fiscal year, they could be included. But so it's important that they be during the fiscal year that you're applying for the funds. I hope that answers the question.
Good, thanks, Jerry.
The second question, does the lawyer have to be in-house? What are the restrictions on their compensation, if any?
I can answer that again. The lawyer, if it's in-house, obviously that can be included. But if the lawyer works for a partner law firm or partner organization, that person can be included, but it has to be answered in the context of the application. So there's no restriction from where the attorney can come from. Okay.
Okay. All right, the next question. What does strong need for financial support mean? How is the strong need demonstrated? Does that mean if you have a case you would file regardless of grant funding that you do not qualify to apply or will score very low?
Well, I can answer that as well. And
I know Jerry, most of these will be Jerry answered, but go ahead, Jerry.
In any event, the idea of the financial need is by looking at the budget for the case. And if there is a shortfall in the budget for the case, then that would demonstrate that you have a need. Now, if you don't have a shortfall, that would indicate that there is no need. And one would presume that you would only be filing for a grant if you had a need for the money to conduct the litigation. It was interesting, and I just add this as an insight, not last year, but the year before on our grants, all the grantees stated when we were engaging in conversations with them about their cases, that they could have not done their cases unless they had received funding from the foundation. So that's what's very heartwarming and worthwhile, so that if you have that need, it gives us the opportunity to supply you with the funds for you can do the litigation of the case.
Thank you, Jerry. All right, next question. Is there any impact on considering an organization if they decide to ask the foundation to support litigation expenses as well as attorney hours?
If I was to answer that, I'm not so sure I understood the question. Could you repeat it again?
Yeah, sure. Is there any impact on considering an applicant organization if they decide to ask the foundation to support litigation expenses as well as attorney hours?
No, there's no difference. If you had an application for only expert fees, that would be equivalent to whether or not you were asking for attorney hours support.
Are there any restrictions on awards or legal fees or anything if the lawyer has been working in-house and is funded?
No, there's no such restriction, no.
Okay. All right, we're coming down to the last two. So if anyone else has additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But the next question, can you elaborate how the case's geographic scope, i.e. either single state, multi-state, or nationwide, will be taken into the foundation's consideration?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is, there really is no difference. It depends on the specific case to which you're applying for. We have done cases in some terms of support where the grant application was for a specific case, food stamps, for instance, in a particular case. And other cases have been nationwide. So there is no difference in terms of making the decision by the foundation, whether it's one case, several cases, or nationwide.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to it, it's helpful for the review process for the foundation, just to be clear where the case is occurring or what the level of impact it is. In past years, we've had to siphon through a good amount of information to try and determine that, so that helps clearly articulate. It helps if the applicant can clearly articulate the geographic scope. So I just wanted to add that as well. All right, the last question. Will an organization be scored higher or lower if more revenue from other sources is budgeted for the case?
No, there's no distinction between whether the funding is internal to your organization or you're getting funding from the partner organization, law firm, or social justice organization. It's the total picture that counts, not, and that's why the application says and or, as Aaron emphasized.
All right, that is all of the questions that we've received. If there's any last minute ones, feel free to put them in the chat. Looks like we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions that comes to mind afterwards, please just submit them by email to the foundation, and we will get back to you either by email or by a telephone call.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Katie. I wanted to mention that the participants, you will be emailed a survey after today's session to evaluate the webinar and its effectiveness and usefulness in your applying to the Foundation for a grant. So we'd ask that you, it's a short survey, complete that and return it to us, please, so we can continue to improve how we're serving our applicants and grantees. And just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you for your interest in applying to the Foundation for a Social Justice Litigation Grant. And also just want to thank all of you. I'm not sure exactly what kind of work you're doing to improve lives in your community, but I know that many people in the social justice nonprofit sector work really, really hard and to make a big impact that, you know, wouldn't be there without your efforts. So on behalf of the foundation, we just want to thank everyone for the work you're doing. We look forward to receiving your application between June 1st and August 1st, and wish you all the best of luck in your applications. And thank you again. We'll conclude the webinar, and a recording of the webinar will be available on the Foundation's website.